What's up, guys? This is Corey with the Dirt City Gym, back with another video for y'all. So today we have a special guest. Today we have Jack. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jack. I am a big fan of Dragon Ball Super, the card game, and I'm just happy to be here. Glad to be invited on by Corey and DBS Decks.
So this is actually our second go about attempting to record this. I had an audio flub last night when we recorded, so hopefully we can get this one knocked out pretty well. So today we've got up here on the screen, we've got Jack's Green Hercule List. Jack took this to the Richmond Regional last weekend and did very well. So Jack, why don't you head and go and get into that for us?
Sure. So the deck I was playing was the Draft Box Hercule from Draft Box 2. I know people are probably more familiar with the Hercule from World Martial Arts Tour, but I think this deck had some interesting characteristics once combined with the red-green expansion cards that just came out a couple months ago. I took it down to Richmond for the regional qualifier. I ended up finishing 3-1 at the tournament. There was a big logjam of 3-1s. I think 8th place through 23rd place were all tied at 3-1 with top 16 advancing. Unfortunately, based on tiebreakers, I finished 19th, but it was still a really fun day. It's a really fun deck to play, and just was thrilled with the result for sure.
It's really cool. So why don't you get into kind of like how you got on the deck, why you decided to play it, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. So the initial idea for the deck came from a video I saw online. It was the Super Playas. I watched a couple other videos, read a couple articles about folks playing red-green builds with Hercule. I tried it out at a local event here at Dream Wizards in Rockville, Maryland, which has pretty stiff competition. You play up against a lot of meta decks, a lot of really good players, and I had some success with it there. I kind of tweaked it, but the deck itself, Hercule. He's only a 1,000 power on the unawakened side and 5,000 on the awakened side. But the real, kind of theory behind this deck is the activate battle that it has on the unawakened side, which lets you pull the top 2 cards from your deck, and then you can, if they're battle cards, combo with them. And with that, you get the effect of any combo cards. So this deck is very heavy on super combos, on the 1+10Ks that serve like super combos, the red Goku and the green Cell. And it also throws in Supreme Kai as kind of a double strike, like a Champa, as well as a variety of other things. And so the general way that the deck works is there's a Time Patrol Trunks, which you can use to Overwhelm, which lets you look at top 2 cards and lets you kind of set up cards for comboing later on, because you can put a card back on the top of the deck, sometimes 2 cards. So obviously what this deck is hoping for is for the super combos, specifically a red and a green one. And then from that, if there is a red and green card in the combo area, which you're getting for free, not only do you get the draw ability from it, but you get to play the SS Gogeta, which is a 20k double striker, and it pops a card. With it, there's a companion Gogeta that you get to play for free when it plays, and if you do pop a card with it, you can play Surprise Attack Frieza or Chilai, which is a free blocker that comes when you destroy a card. So the general idea is that you'd play either the 1-drop green Gohan or the 1-drop red Trunks. A lot of people that have played this deck before, I don't think they realize that the activate battle does not have to be based on the leader attack. So I think a lot of people think you do a 1k attack and then yes, you get to combo up, 5k and 5k or 5k and 10k or something like that. But in actuality, it works for any activate battle once per turn, as long as you're on offense. And so the idea is that you put one of these cheap crit attackers out there, and then all of a sudden a 1-drop Trunks or 1-drop Gohan goes from 5k to 15k crit with its ability, Self-Awakening, and then now all of a sudden you're throwing 2 additional combo cards on for free. There's a lot of 10Ks in here, including the Supreme Kais. So all of a sudden that could be a 35k double strike crit very early in game, and then it swarms the board with the Gogeta, possibly another Gogeta, surprise attack Frieza, and you end up with a lot of pressure. This is a very aggro deck. You combine that with the Bodyguard Legend, which comes out for free as well if they have a battle card. And basically the theory of this deck is to try to win on turn 3 to just overwhelm with pressure. And then on the Awaken side, which is used less frequently, but it's also something that I think comes as a surprise to players. When you Awaken, you draw 2, and then if you toss your hand, the leader gets plus 50,000, and if you happen to toss 5 cards or more, you end up getting 50k plus triple strike. And you do draw a card, so that could draw into another super combo, so on and so forth. So it's not as though the final strike is guaranteed at just 55k. It can be even bigger than that. So anyways, it's a pretty nasty deck. It's very aggro, and it's one of those types of decks that probably, if it drew correctly, could take out any deck in the meta. But at the same time, if it draws poorly and you build your hand with all sorts of things that you can't play right away, then it definitely will lose to even decks well outside of the meta.
Nice. So let's kind of go into like preparing for the tournament and everything. Like, what were you building to see, expecting to see? Like, what matchups were you looking forward to, not looking forward to, that kind of stuff?
Sure. So my expectations greatly differed from what actually happened as far as results. But I was expecting to see a lot of Victory Strike. I knew that was really big in the meta right now, and I thought with maybe the looming end of Cold Bloodlust and Battering Laser that we might see some of these, last hurrahs for Victory Strike. I mean, I think it'll still be out there, but anyways, that was the deck I was mostly targeting because for most of those, Path to Greatness is played turn 3, and then on turn 4, they're leading into Height of Mastery. And since this deck usually applies a lot of pressure, especially against like the yellow Broly leader where it's self-awakening anyways, this just applies a lot of pressure, and so it usually can end the game turn 3 before Height of Mastery is ever played. And that was kind of the theory. My fears going into the tournament was that I would see Ginetta, which since this deck draws top 2 from the deck and puts him into the combo area, it essentially helps mill its own deck. And so against Ginetta, it's a pretty dangerous matchup. And also, I had played this against the Vanilla Kid Q before, and it's not a great matchup. Any board that goes really wide that can get a lot of attacks, this deck has a weakness against, because the leader is only 1k on the unawakened side, which you try to stay unawakened as long as possible, or just 5k on the awakened side. So with any wide board, even if they're small attackers, just huge repetition of attacks will eventually wear down this deck. So I was nervous about Vanilla Q as well. I didn't end up playing Vanilla Kid Q at all. My first round was actually against the Victory Strike. It was a Shenron Victory Strike deck. I actually lost to it 0-2. That was my only loss for the day. And when I did face Ginetta in the final round, I ended up winning at 2-0. So, expectations out the window. I think some of that had to do with drawing, and some of it had to do with how I piloted the deck. But it certainly, expectations were different than how it turned out. But I think overall, it did bolster the idea in my mind that this deck really could beat anything, but it also definitely could lose to even something outside the meta.
Right. So kind of segueing off of that, could you kind of get into what all of your matchups were throughout the day and how that all went?
Sure. So my first match was against the traditional Shenron with Victory Strike. The kind of nuance to this deck was that it wasn't actually playing Path to Greatness. So it kind of took me a little bit by surprise in the first game. One of my strategies going into this was to always play on the draw, and basically to get the first big crit attacks in early just to apply pressure. And so I would always in general defer if I had lost to go second. That worked in his benefit because basically he was playing the traditional evolution for Victory Strike, and so he double objectioned both times, and what was my turn 2 and his turn 3, he got Victory Strike out, and both times I didn't have enough combo power to overcome it. So it was a pretty open and shut loss. I think in hindsight, I probably should not have stuck to kind of my rigid strategy of always going second to get the first attack in. I think having one energy up on him and being able to survive that, or possibly if I had like Dende in my sideboard, I might have been able to survive that game a little bit better. So I kind of thought after that first round, I thought, oh, okay, well, this is how the day's going to go. But I ended up playing Pan in the second round. It was kind of a traditional Pan deck. The games went extremely fast because of the pressure that Hercule was applying. And so I ended up only seeing, like, he played the Anniversary Box Trunks. He played the Burst Attacks on Gohan. But in both games, I won 2-0, and I think the overall match was done in 15 or 20 minutes. It was extremely fast. And in that game, I was able to actually do at least in one of the games, I was able to do the Awaken Leader ability for Triple Strike with 50k, which was really cool. My third match was against the Broly chain with the Broly starter deck leader. It was probably my most interesting matchup of the day. I ended up winning 2-1. In the first matchup, I kind of took him by surprise. I think he wasn't expecting the pressure I was going to apply, and my strategy always going against the Broly chain is to try to just break the chain, be as aggressive as possible. Don't be fearful that when you KO one of the Brolys that there's another one coming behind it, because you never know what's in their hand, and you may very well break their chain and start them all over again. In game one, that's exactly what happened. Since the one-drop Broly came out and he had to take 2 life, I ended up killing the chain somewhere along the way, and he had to start all over again, which was 2 more life. And by taking half of his life off the bat, the pressure I was applying was just too great. So that was definitely a good win. In the second game, kind of the weaknesses of this deck came out. I ended up losing when I had probably 11 cards in hand, but they were all 1+10 Ks, and that is since this deck plays so many of the 1+10k super combos, if you don't draw into them on the activate battle, but you end up picking them up along the way, and you can't just charge them all for energy, you do end up with a pretty substantial hand that you may not be able to actually play or not have the energy to play, and that's what happened in the second game. Additionally, it kind of showed what was unique about the matchup, because the 2 Brolys in the chain that are activate battle that pop a card, since some of the shenanigans of how the Hercule deck swarms the board, it can happen both on offense and on defense. It's just whenever you play a rival with the red-green Gogeta, it kind of messed with me a little bit, because I'd put a surprise attack freeze out there, and then in comes the next Broly that's going to activate battle and pop it before I could ever use it. And there was kind of a little bit of a timing issue that took some adjustment in the third game, but it just proved to be too much. It was a pretty close matchup, but like I said, my hand size was big. I just couldn't do anything with it. I drew poorly. So in game 3, I subbed in Father Son Kamehameha, which really proved to be, I think, the difference maker. When I played it, I was able to pop one of his cards, one of the Brolys, without doing it within a battle. So there was no activate battle where it was destroying a card or destroying the attacking card or destroying one of my other attackers or my arrival that had just played. So I was able to clear his board and then lead in with the activate battle to swarm the board and finish with the attacks. It was a really good game, for sure. I did get lucky along the way, even in that third match, because on my last defensive turn, he had a very large attack that was clearly leading into what would be the SCR Broly afterwards, so I knew I had to preserve the life. I ended up drawing into my last 2 super combos, so my combo board actually had all 4 Paragus super combos, as well as other cards. So I got pretty fortunate there that I had the right cards in hand, and then I was able to draw into them well. But that is also one of the benefits of Paragus, right? You dive 2 deeper into the deck and get to warp 1, so you're constantly kind of churning your hand for better cards. And then my last matchup was Ginetta. I was just excited to be 2-1, and at the time I thought with a win I would qualify for Nationals. I still think kind of, if you go 3-1 with a green Hercule, they should just kind of give it to you, But, it is what it is. I saw Ginetta as my matchup, and I almost just said, GG, good game. This is not going to go well for me. But it ended up being, the first game was really close. I ended up winning 2-0, but the first game was really close. I did almost mill out when the game came to an end, when I got the final attacks in. I had one card left in deck. It had totally iced me out. I had these 1+10k super combos I couldn't use. I had Paraguses I couldn't use. I couldn't even awaken to do the final leader ability to toss my hand, because Awakening was a mandatory draw 2 condition, so I would have killed myself in any of those things. I had to get really creative to beat him in that game. In the course of it, turn 4, I hard cast the green cell that's kind of serves as a 1+10k super combo. I later hard cast Supreme Kai for 2 energy. Instead of using it as a double strike, just to get an additional attacker out there. And part of what stalled me, in addition to the milling aspect, was he played Striving to be the Best Goku, which had barrier, and I had no real ability, at least in game 1, to pop it. And so it really iced me out of being able to play the 1-drop Gohans or the 1-drop Trunks to apply critical pressure. In other matches, I had gone up against Crisis Crusher and things like that, but I was able to, destroy it pretty easily. The Striving to be the Best really was a card that threw me for a loop. But in Game 2, I subbed in Close Quarters Goku from the Anniversary Box, which when you put a dual color energy in the energy area, you can combo with it, and it will destroy a barrier card of 3 or less. So knowing that, originally I had that in the sideboard for the purpose of taking out Path to Greatness, but I ended up using it for Striving to be the Best Goku. And I also subbed in Scientist Fu because I didn't need all this draw power that the deck had, so I got rid of a couple of the cells, and I ended up putting in Scientist Fu as well. The game was not nearly as close as the first one. I probably ended the game with like 15 cards in deck, if I were to estimate. But on turn 4, I did Foreseeing Hit. I pulled 2 of his Bojacks with Arrival that would have been used to combo out and then provide a blocker to kind of absorb some of the pressure I was applying. And then in the final turn, I played the Anniversary Box Fu, which although he Crusher Balled it, so I didn't get the triple attack in, it did at least kind of ice him out for when he was doing negates and things like that he was constantly having to warp a card. And at that time, I had 2 of the double strike Gojitas on board. I still had my Foreseeing Hit, which was double strike. I had the Anniversary Box Fu, which I couldn't use. But with all of that, and then the final, I did use the Awaken ability there for a final attack. I was able to take the game. So ended up going 2-0 against Ginetta. It was really exciting. And just overall, it was definitely a really interesting set of matchups. It's kind of what you'd expect at one of these major tournaments, that there's very big meta decks, but it was really cool that with kind of a rogue deck, I was able to compete there.
Yeah, and you played, I mean, the only thing you'd say maybe was off meta would be the Shenron Victory Strike, just because of the way it was built, but everything you played was really meta. I mean, even with the Shenron. So it's really cool. So kind of like going back with hindsight, is there anything in your main deck that you say, okay, maybe I didn't need that, or it wasn't super important, or things like that? Obviously, now you know what your matchups were, but just as a general, cards that just weren't very useful.
I mean, I think the Sun Goten Family of Justice, it really does serve a purpose against a lot of decks, because you get to combo with it for free on the Activate Battle, and it does pop a card, which then again triggers the whole surprise attack freeze the chain without needing Arrival with Gogeta. I will say though that was the most often card that I was subbing out, because when it was in hand, it was essentially a dead card. I would either charge it, or there really was no instance that I was comboing with it for the 1+5k to pop a card. It just never came up. So I constantly was pulling that out. I think the Foreseeing Hit, I only ran one of them. I might actually put a second one in there. Just a lot of the games don't end up going to turn 4, but I think it really does make the opponent think twice about just kind of holding back negates, because they know that I don't know, some of their super combos or something might get pulled from hand, and so they can't really just completely play defensive, and they might just go ahead and combo out of something earlier, and you might get some hand advantage along the way. So I think the Sun Goten Family of Justice probably could come out. Bodyguard Legend might be able to go down to 2, but honestly, it was very useful when things like Crisis Crusher are played and things like that, and you don't want to play the 1-drop Gohan or the 1-drop Trunks just yet because you're afraid they'll get popped, or because you can't attack with them because of Crisis Crusher. Being able to have like a free attack with Bodyguard, or even just, I occasionally just did use the leader ability and then activated battle with him so that I could, get a rival going and pop a card and get the whole chain going. But overall, I'd say the Family of Justice probably was the least useful card, but I still maintain it's definitely at least a sideboard card. It especially for a wide board, when you're going against a deck that has smaller cards that don't have barrier, it definitely is helpful for sure.
Nice. And setting up that segue, let's talk about the sideboard. So kind of give us your thought process behind the cards that you included and things like that.
Sure. Well, so I got to give credit where credit's due. The day before the tournament, I was talking with my buddy Eric Thompson, and he helped give me some good insight into good cards for sideboard, and we talked a little bit about what could come out, what couldn't. So there were a few, obviously a lot of these cards were targeted at potential decks I'd be coming up against. The Son Goku in Close Quarters, as I mentioned before, was supposed to target Path to Greatness, especially because although it costs 2 energy to combo with that, and technically you get its ability of popping a barrier card of 3 and less, whether you play it or combo with it, but it still costs 2 energy. But with this Activate Battle, you can play it for free. It was kind of designed for that. I think it's a very useful card, at least in the current meta, for a sideboard. Obviously Mass Saiyan for Vanilla Kid Q, which I never came across. The Father Son Kamehameha is just a very versatile card. If you're running green and you're going up against anything that has big evolved targets that are going to end up being bigger than their energy, it's extremely valuable. It's only 1 cost, and you don't have to do it Activate Battle, so you can do it on your offensive turn, and it's just kind of as an activate main, I think is actually very beneficial. And I had some other things here. The Fu the Dark Banisher, I think, is probably a sideboard card that every deck should be running right now, just because it's extremely powerful, and especially if you're not already running Overwhelm, and so you'll have 8 cards in discard, on turn 4 or turn 5 to play that. It really does ice an opponent out. So that was kind of the theory. Some of these other ones, I had a purpose behind them. I'm not sure that they really came to fruition. I'm not sure in hindsight that I would do it over again. Burst Attack Son Gohan, the theory was that this deck has a really big draw problem often, especially when the Activate Battle does not lead into super combos. I didn't end up playing it. I could still see a reason why that would be in here. The Bardock Fully Unleashed, again, is just a general good Overwhelm card. I also think it's always good to have in the sideboard an Overwhelm card that doesn't actually cost an energy to play. Scientist Foos and things like that are wonderful cards, but I sometimes think between this Bardock, which clears the board of big targets, or even just the old school, I think it was Crossworlds, Bardock that was a double striker that you don't have to pay any energy for, you just straight Overwhelm it. I think those take people by surprise when they see you tapped out, and you can often go for game. I had Zarbon Hidden Potential in there. The theory was that I'd go against something like Baby or something like that would end up constantly clearing my board, and then at least I'd have some rebuttal to take out one of their cards or to weaken it. That never really came up. And then the SSG Vegeta Energy of the Gods. The idea of that is similar to the Bodyguard Legic, especially if I needed to sub out a green card, which was, it becomes a 1 energy attacker, so it survives things like Crisis Crusher, striving to be the best, or the Anniversary Box Kai that's a counterplay, because you can get it on the board for cheap, and then it becomes an attacker that's a 3 energy attacker. So that helps get the chain going sometimes when the 1-drops are being iced out. So I didn't end up using it, but I still think it's a pretty good sideboard card.
Nice. So kind of looking towards the future with set 7 and everything that's coming up, do you kind of see yourself still playing this deck? Is there anything in particular like, oh cool, I'm going to make sure I put that in this list, stuff like that?
Well, I've always been the sort of player that kind of goes on to new cards, and I'm always creating really weird things to play with. So I don't often play the same thing twice, but I really do enjoy playing this deck. It was the second time I played it. I could really see myself playing it a third or fourth time. And I do think that, especially with the new red-green cards coming out in set 7, that adding one of the ones, there are some of these new abilities that trigger based on having a red, green, and energy, and I only did that in the game 2 against Ginetta. Other than that, I was never actually charging the red, green Gojitas because I was just using them for arrival. But I could see adding another one in there to trigger some of those combos would be helpful for sure. I know that from the expansion set, there was a promo that came, the Broly, that lets you draw at the end of a turn 2. I mean, that probably could be valuable. Again, it costs 2 energy though. So some of the problem with incorporating the new cards into this deck is that this deck is trying to go off on, no later than turn 3. And so you're really kind of restricted by what cards you can play with just 3 energy. But I think it would be interesting. I also think it would be interesting to do a blue-yellow build, but I do think it would be restricted a lot because, your negates are essentially going to have to be green. Your super combos are going to have to be green pretty much. So it would be somewhat restricted. But I think there's definitely some possibility here. I mean, this card, the leader card, was overlooked for a while. And maybe rightfully so. It didn't have a total place without, skills like Arrival being in place. But the truth is that every offensive turn getting 2 free combos, I mean, yes, they're blind. You can set up cards, but that's like 20,000 additional combo power, potentially with additional draws, potentially creating a double striker, which you could add to a crit attacker, which is what this deck was doing. I think that's extremely valuable because although you might not have the hand size, at any moment on offense, you essentially had 2 additional cards in hand that you were just committed to comboing with. So I think it was really valuable. And I do think I would play it again in set 7. I'm not sure that it'll continue to be competitive, but I do think at least in the immediate future it still is.
Nice. So last kind of question over the deck. You kind of covered it a little bit, but did you ever get to actually use the full backside of the Hercule ability?
Yeah, which is really fun because I think there's a couple misconceptions about this leader, and one I mentioned before was that the activate battle on the unawakened side has to be with the leader attack. It doesn't, and that's part of what makes this extremely valuable. You can do it on a crit attacker. On the backside, though, I think a lot of people think that you have to have 5 cards in hand in order to trigger the plus 50k, but you don't. You only need 1 card to toss to get the plus 50k ability on your leader. If you have 5 or more, you get the triple strike with it. But a lot of times, even at the locals that I played before, people didn't realize that, and when they were down to 1 life, they weren't concerned because I had a smaller than 5 hand. In game 2 against Pan, I did actually, when he was at 3 life, I had 3 cards in hand. I think he wasn't too concerned. I ended up awakening, drawing 2 to make it 5, tossed it, and went triple strike for game. So that was pretty cool, and I think he was a bit frustrated by that. And then in my final game against Ginetta, I actually won with the leader attack. He was down to 1 life, and I only had, I think, 2 or 3 cards in hand. But and I think that took him by surprise. I think he thought he was going to survive 1 more defensive step, 1 more defensive turn. But yeah, I got to pull it off twice. It's pretty cool when you have a leader that has 5k on the awakened side, and people are thinking, well, there's no way that does anything, and then you pull off some massive finishing move. It definitely is gratifying, and it's part of what makes this deck really fun to do, and gives you kind of an extra bullet in the holster as you're going through.
Nice. All right, so do we got any final thoughts on the deck, the event itself?
Well, the deck is great. I highly recommend if people want to have fun, mess around with something new. I highly recommend it. The event was fun. I would say I was a little disappointed it was cut at 4 rounds. I don't know what would have happened in round 5. Maybe I would have lost. But it would have been nice to have at least a fighter's chance to compete for a shot at nationals. But it is what it is. Life goes on. There's always more Dragon Ball cards and more Dragon Ball tournaments. But I had a lot of fun. I think it's a fun deck. I still maintain that, at least in the current meta, that this deck can beat anything if it draws well. I think it could also lose to anything if it draws poorly. And I think that's actually unique to this deck because there's a lot of meta decks that have inherently bad matchups or something that they're just always good against. But I think this is the sort of deck that, because it's because of its nature as being a very aggressive deck, I think it kind of can put anybody back on their heels, and if it draws right, it can win. So that was a lot of fun. And I'm not positive if I'm going to Otakon yet, but you might see me there with the old world champion Hercule.
Nice.
So for sure.
Cool. Well, do you have any shout outs or anything like that you want to get out?
Yeah, well, I already mentioned Eric. Thank you for helping me on the sideboard. And I wanted to give a brief shout out to Tom K, aka Super Saiyan Blue, KO Ken, Ragtime. He and I got into this game together. We never played a trading card game, but we were just fans of Dragon Ball. And, we've had a lot of fun for the last year and a half playing this game. And it's great having a partner to bounce ideas off of and practice against. So it's been a lot of fun. So thank you, Tom. And that's pretty much it.
All right, cool, man. Well, that's all we got. So if you have any questions for Jack, I've got his Twitter handle that I'll be putting down in the description below, so feel free to shoot him any things like that. I'll have the deck list up. It's available over on DBS Decks right now. But other than that, guys, that is it, and we will see y'all next time.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.